You ever notice how the game of hide and seek changes when you're older? When you're a kid, it's just fun. Giggling in the dark, trying not to breathe too loud, praying your hiding spot holds up. But somewhere along the line, that same silence stops feeling safe. Because the older you get, the more you realize the dark doesn't always hide you. Sometimes it hides something else. Tonight, we're diving into 3 real-life stories of hide and seek that turned into pure nightmares, games that started with laughter and ended in terror. From a basement that seemed to whisper back, to footsteps in the woods that didn't belong to anyone playing, and a stranger who joined the game uninvited. These aren't just campfire tales. They're the kind of stories that make you question whether come out, wherever you are, was ever meant to be said out loud. If you love chilling true stories that make you check over your shoulder, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit that like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And hey, share this video with that one friend who always says they're not scared. Let's test that theory together. It started the way most ordinary nights do. Quiet, unremarkable, and perfectly safe. A 15-year-old boy, home alone for the first time in weeks, waiting for his parents to return from dinner. He wasn't afraid of the dark. He wasn't the type to jump at the sound of old pipes or the house settling. But fear doesn't always arrive with a warning. Sometimes it sneaks in under the guise of something familiar, like a game. That night, his friend Chris came over. They were the same age, both bored, both restless, both old enough to know better but still young enough to chase the thrill of childhood. They'd played video games until their eyes hurt, flipped through channels until everything blurred together, and finally, as the silence grew heavier, Chris made a suggestion that would change the way they saw their own house forever. Let's play hide and seek. It sounded ridiculous. 2 teenagers playing a kid's game. But the boy agreed, mostly because there was nothing else to do, and because deep down, part of him still liked the rush of hiding in the dark, of hearing footsteps grow closer while trying not to breathe. They turned off every light except the one in the kitchen. The air grew still, thick. Shadows stretched down the hall, across the walls, into corners where the light couldn't reach. It was no longer the same house. It felt older, emptier, like it had been waiting for this moment. The rules were simple. No attic, no crawl space, no going outside. Everything else was fair game. Chris hid first. The boy covered his eyes in the living room and began counting. The sound of Chris's footsteps thudded against the floor, fading deeper into the house. Then, silence. When he reached 50, he called out, "Ready or not, here I come." The words echoed strangely, swallowed by the quiet. He began his search in the kitchen. Nothing behind the door, nothing under the table. The refrigerator hummed softly. He moved on. Bathroom, hallway, closet, empty rooms. Each space he checked seemed colder than the last. He climbed the stairs, the old wood creaking beneath him. He told himself it was just the house, but somehow it felt like the sound came from deeper within the walls. He searched his parents' bedroom, his own, the guest room at the end of the hall. The guest room door was cracked open, just slightly. He pushed it wider, expecting Chris to jump out and scare him. But nothing. Only stillness. He bent down to check under the bed, then opened the closet. Empty. So where was he? He went back downstairs, heart beating faster now, not out of fear, but impatience. The basement. Maybe Chris had gone down there. He opened the basement door, cool air spilling out like breath from an open mouth. He flicked on the light, but the single bulb hanging from the ceiling barely cut through the dark. Dust drifted lazily in the beam. The air smelled of concrete and old cardboard. He searched behind the washer, under the stairs, and there, tucked behind a pile of boxes, was Chris, grinning. "Finally," Chris laughed. "Took you long enough." Relieved, he laughed too. They switched roles. Now it was his turn to hide. He went upstairs and slipped under the guest bed, pulling the bedskirt down around him. The dark closed in tight. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Footsteps began moving through the house, slow, deliberate. Chris's voice echoed faintly from below. Then came the sound of him climbing the stairs. The boy held his breath. The steps creaked closer, each one sharper, more drawn out. He could hear the faint sound of breathing near the door. Steady, rhythmic, not hurried like Chris's. A shadow moved across the floor, visible even through the small gap of fabric. The figure stood there for a long time just outside the bed skirt. Then, it moved away. He waited, listening for Chris to call the round over, but the house stayed silent. Minutes passed. The air under the bed grew warm and thin. Finally, he crawled out, stretching his cramped legs, half annoyed that Chris was dragging the game out. He called his friend's name. From downstairs, a voice answered, "I'm in the basement." He froze. That didn't make sense. The voice had come from directly below him, muffled by the floorboards. He walked toward the stairs, calling again. The voice replied, cheerful, familiar. "Still looking for you. Where are you hiding?" His stomach twisted. He called back, "I'm out. I'm in the kitchen." There was a pause. Then quick footsteps on the stairs. Chris appeared, panting, confused. "How'd you get up here so fast?" "What do you mean?" the boy asked. "I've been upstairs the whole time." Chris frowned. "No, man. I checked the guest room. I heard someone moving in there." They argued for a moment, both unsettled, both trying to laugh it off. Eventually, they went another round, but neither of them could shake the uneasy feeling crawling beneath their skin. The house felt different now, watchful. As the night dragged on, they heard small noises. A thud from upstairs, a door hinge groaning, a faint shuffle like someone walking just beyond the hallway. At first, they ignored it. Then a louder sound came. A heavy bump from the second floor, something falling hard. They froze. "Your parents?" Chris whispered. He shook his head. They were still out. The two sat still, listening. Then came the unmistakable creak of footsteps above them, slow, steady, as though someone were pacing the hall. Every hair on his arms stood up. He grabbed the fireplace poker. "If someone's up there, we can't just sit here." Chris stayed behind him as they crept up the stairs. The steps groaned, echoing through the empty house. At the top, they stopped. The guest room door, left open minutes ago, was now closed. Neither of them spoke. The air was dense, the kind that feels charged before a storm. Then from behind the door came a soft dragging sound, fabric scraping across carpet. Chris whispered, "Let's just go." But curiosity has its own gravity. The boy raised the poker, hand trembling, and pushed the door open. The room was dark. The shapes of furniture loomed like shadows caught mid-motion. No one was there. The closet door stood half open. He took a step closer, heart pounding so hard it echoed in his chest. He yanked the closet door open, empty. Coats, boxes, stillness. They both laughed shakily, forcing out relief that didn't feel real. "Guess we're just freaking ourselves out," Chris said. But before the laughter faded, a sound came from downstairs. The front door, opening, then closing. They froze again. "Someone's in the house," Chris whispered. They ran, stumbling down the hall, crouching in the boys' room with the lights off. The house was alive with silence, tense, expectant. They could hear faint footsteps downstairs, slow, cautious, almost deliberate. He wanted to grab his phone, but it was still on the couch. The only way out was the hallway, past the stairs. The footsteps moved toward the kitchen. Then the basement door opened. Hinges creaked, the sound of someone descending step by step. They waited until the last footfall disappeared below. Then they ran. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, across the yard, not daring to look back. They didn't stop until they reached Chris's house across the street. Chris's parents called the police. Officers searched every corner. Basement, attic, closets. No signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. The police said the usual. Old houses make noise. Imagination runs wild. But they knew better. They knew what footsteps sound like. They knew the difference between pipes and breathing. Weeks passed, but the unease never left. Every creak of the floor made his stomach knot. Every shadow near a doorway made him look twice. Sometimes, when he was alone, he swore he could hear it again. The slow drag across the carpet. The faint thud of steps above when no one else was home. He never played hide-and-seek again. Because that night, the game changed something. It taught him what few ever realize. When you hide in the dark, you might not be the only one waiting to be found. There's something about the woods at night that changes the way you breathe. The air feels heavier there, thicker, like the darkness itself has weight. And when you're young, that's exactly what makes it fun. The rush of fear, the thrill of being unseen, the idea that maybe, just maybe, someone's about to find you. For the kids on Maple Hollow Road, the woods behind their houses were their playground. A thin strip of trees separating the neighborhood from the endless stretch of forest beyond, deep enough to feel wild but close enough that parents didn't worry, at least not until that summer. The story comes from one of those kids. He was 14 then, old enough to know the rules but still young enough to break them. It was late August. The air was hot and wet, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin even after the sun goes down. 5 of them gathered in Tyler's backyard. Him, his best friend Tyler, Tyler's little brother Matt, and 2 kids from down the street, Jason and Eric. They'd played hide-and-seek 100 times before, but never like this. That night, the moon was thin, the woods pitch black, and someone, probably Jason, had dared them to play in the trees. They all agreed instantly, because when you're a kid, fear feels like a challenge. The rules were simple. Stay close enough to hear the seeker call, "Game over." Don't go too deep. Don't wander past the creek. Jason volunteered to count first. The rest of them scattered into the woods, laughter fading into rustling leaves. The boy and Tyler ran side by side until the first row of trees swallowed the light from the houses. Then they split up. He ducked behind a fallen log, crouching low. Crickets filled the silence. Somewhere in the distance, Jason's voice echoed. 48, 49, 50, then faded. The game had begun. He pressed himself close to the dirt, heart thudding fast. The ground was damp, the smell of earth sharp in his nose. Minutes passed. He heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching through leaves somewhere nearby. He smiled to himself. Jason wasn't going to catch him that easily. But the footsteps stopped. He waited, holding his breath. The sound of the woods returned, insects, the hum of wind, but whoever was there hadn't moved. He listened harder, but all he heard was breathing. Not his, not Jason's light, joking, panting when he ran. This was slower, heavier. He almost called out, almost said Jason's name, but the words caught in his throat. Something deep down told him not to, and just like that, the footsteps started again, moving away, deeper into the trees. He stayed still for a long time until Jason finally called out that the round was over. When he ran back to the yard, everyone else was already there. Tyler, Eric, Jason. Then Matt came sprinting out of the dark, dirt smeared up his legs and on his face, laughing, breathless. They compared hiding spots. When he told them he'd been behind the log, Jason frowned. "I never went that far in. I only searched near the fence." The boy froze. "Then who walked past me?" Nobody answered. They brushed it off, because what else do kids do when something feels off? They laugh. They move on. The next round, he was the seeker. He counted loud against the nearest tree, voice echoing across the yard and into the dark. 50. He opened his eyes. Silence. He searched the yards first, behind the shed, the fence, under the deck. Found Eric crouched behind a trash bin, Tyler hiding by the bushes. Then he moved into the woods. It was quieter this time. Even the insects seemed to hush when he stepped past the first line of trees. His flashlight beam shook slightly as he walked. The wood swallowed the light, made every shadow look deeper than it should have been. Then he heard it again. Footsteps, slow, heavy, crunching on dry leaves. He swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. He moved forward, calling softly, "Jason? Matt?" No answer. The footsteps came again. Closer now, but not toward him. Like someone pacing just ahead, always a few steps out of sight. Then Jason's voice rang out from behind him. "Game's over! Everyone come back!" He spun around. Jason was standing near the fence, waving him back toward the yard. "But," he started, "weren't you just over there?" Jason frowned. "No, I've been here the whole time." The boy's stomach tightened. Twice now, someone had been in the woods with them. Someone who wasn't part of the game they played again anyway because that's what kids do. They choose denial over fear. Each round, the unease grew. Every crack of a twig made them jump. Every flicker of the flashlight became a face that wasn't there. By the fourth game, even Jason was glancing over his shoulder. Then came the last round. The boy stayed near the edge this time, crouched in tall grass where he could still see the faint orange glow of the porch lights. He could hear Jason's distant voice counting down. When the woods went silent, something changed. It started faint. A whisper. Too low to make out the words. Too soft to tell where it came from. He thought maybe it was one of the others trying to mess with him, so he held still, waiting for a laugh or a shout. But it didn't come. The whispering stopped for a moment, then started again, closer this time. He felt it before he heard it. A tickle of breath against the back of his neck. He turned around. Nothing. Then the footsteps. Not running this time. Walking. Slow, careful, deliberate. He could see movement through the trees now. A shape. Tall. Still. Watching. He didn't move. Couldn't. Then Jason called that the round was over. The sound broke whatever spell had frozen him. He bolted toward the light. Everyone was laughing when he arrived, except him. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He told them what he'd heard, what he'd seen, the whisper, the figure. But they brushed it off. "Probably just one of us messing around," Eric said. "Or an animal." But Matt looked different. Quiet. Pale. Then he said something that made the rest of them go silent. "Did anyone else see the man?" They stared at him. "What man?" Tyler asked. Matt swallowed. "The tall one, standing in the trees. He didn't move, he was just watching." The others laughed nervously, said he was trying to scare them. But the boy knew what he'd seen. That tall shape in the dark, the sound of whispering that wasn't human speech. They ended the game after that. Sat in the grass, sipping warm soda, trying to shake off the fear. But the woods behind them felt wrong now, like the trees were listening. When they finally went home, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faint outline of that figure. He told himself it was imagination, until he heard it again. A voice, whispering, from outside his window. He sat up in bed, heart hammering, listening. The sound was faint, words too soft to understand. It could have been the wind, but wind doesn't say your name. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, his mother asked why the window was open. He told her he didn't open it. She said maybe he forgot. He didn't argue. But when he looked out, he noticed something in the dirt beneath the window. A footprint, bare, long, pressed deep. He told Tyler about it the next day. Tyler said maybe it was from one of the guys. But none of them had been near his house. They never played hide and seek again after that. Not in the woods. Not anywhere. Years later, he still thinks about it. The way the whisper seemed to crawl inside his head, the way the shape never moved, the way every instinct screamed, "Don't run, don't speak, don't look away." And sometimes, on summer nights when the air is heavy and the crickets go quiet, he swears he can still hear it. A voice just beyond the trees, saying his name in that same low, deliberate tone. Like the game never really ended, like the woods never stopped playing back. It was one of those long, heavy summer days that feels like it'll never end. The kind where the air ripples above the asphalt and every sound, every cicada, every rustle of grass, seems magnified by the heat. Out on the edge of a small Pennsylvania town, a group of friends spent nearly every day in the same place. A wide backyard that stretched all the way to the tree line with an old shed tilting near the far fence. That afternoon, they were doing what they always did. Burning energy, chasing boredom, laughing too loud at nothing. There were 4 of them, Ryan, Josh, Adam, and Ben, all in their early teens, all halfway between boyhood and whatever comes next. The owner of the yard, the narrator of this story, remembers it like a photograph. Sunlight bleeding through the leaves, the smell of cut grass, the rhythmic bounce of a basketball hitting cracked concrete. Nothing about it felt strange, until a boy they'd never seen before appeared. He came from the dirt road that cut through the woods, tall, a little older, maybe 16. His name, he said, was Keith. He walked right up to them like he belonged there, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was dressed wrong for the weather, jeans, a gray shirt, shoes caked with dust. He looked out of place, but he carried himself like someone who had been there before. At first, nobody spoke. The group just stared, waiting for him to say something. Keith finally broke the silence. "Need another player?" His voice was calm, almost too calm. Ben, trying to be polite, tossed him the ball. Keith caught it without looking down, then let it drop to the ground, letting it roll away. "Basketball's boring," he said. "Let's play something better." He suggested manhunt, hide and seek but bigger, faster. He said it like he'd been waiting to play all day. It should have been strange. This kid they didn't know, suggesting a game that needed their whole yard, that knew exactly where to hide. But they didn't think about that then. When you're 14, danger doesn't feel real until it's staring at you. They split into 2 teams. Keith volunteered to hunt first. He smiled wider than before. "I'm good at finding people," he said. The boy and his 2 friends ran for cover as the hunters counted down. The woods hummed with heat. Somewhere behind him, the count reached 50, then silence. He ducked into the shed. Then, it smelled like gasoline and dust, a mix that stuck to the back of his throat. Light spilled through cracks in the boards. He crouched under a stack of tarps, heart pounding, trying not to breathe too loud. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then, the creak of the shed door, a pause, and then, in one sharp motion, the tarp ripped away. It was Adam, laughing, calling him out. "Found you." The boy tried to laugh, too, but something in Adam's voice sounded forced, too bright, too quick, like someone trying to fill silence that scared them. They walked back to the house together, relieved to be back in the light. One by one, the others appeared. Ryan, Ben, Josh. Everyone except Keith. At first, they figured he was just taking the game too seriously, but as the minutes stretched into 10, then 20, that easy summer confidence started to fade. They called for him. No answer. Eventually, Adam shrugged. He probably got bored. They wanted to believe that. To believe he'd just walked off the same way he came, back down that dirt road toward wherever he'd come from. But the truth didn't fit that neatly. When the sun started to drop, the boy noticed something near his bedroom window, a piece of rope lying in the grass. Old, frayed, weather-stained. He almost didn't touch it, but he did. It felt damp, like it had just been pulled out of the dirt. He threw it aside and told himself it meant nothing. That night, the house was quiet. His father had gone to bed early. The only light came from the small glow of his phone screen. He'd almost forgotten about Keith. Almost. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Soft. Deliberate. Not from the hallway. From outside the door. He froze. Listened. The steps stopped right behind the door. He whispered, dat? No answer. The silence that followed was worse than any sound could have been. His pulse thudded in his ears. The handle didn't move, but he could hear something. Breathing. Low. Slow. Then, after a long minute, the front door creaked open. Closed again. He ran to his father's room. His dad didn't hesitate, grabbed the old shotgun from under the bed, eyes sharp now. The kind of sharp that only shows up when something's truly wrong. They searched the house, every closet, every corner, nothing. By morning, daylight made it all seem stupid, a story he'd tell to his friends who'd laugh and call him jumpy. But one thing didn't sit right. The rope was gone. That night, sleep came in bursts. Around 2 in the morning, a sound woke him again. Faint, irregular, a slow scraping across glass. He knew that sound. He didn't want to. It was coming from his window. He sat up, barely breathing. The scraping continued, soft at first, then harder, like something being dragged. He forced himself to look. Through a small slit in the blinds, he saw a shape, a person. Standing inches away, face hidden in the dark. He stumbled back, heart hammering, shouting for his father. The older man bolted from his room, ran outside, calling into the dark. The night swallowed his voice. Whoever had been there was gone. The next morning, the boy noticed prints by the window. Not shoe prints, just impressions in the dirt, like someone had been standing there for a long time, watching. His friends tried to laugh it off again, but none of them sounded convinced. Ryan admitted Keith had seemed off, too quiet, too sure of where to look when they'd been hiding. Adam said maybe he'd been some drifter. Josh joked he was probably a ghost, then stopped laughing when nobody else did. Days passed. No one saw Keith again. No one ever asked where he'd come from. There wasn't a single house just up the road like he'd claimed. Just trees and an old hunting path that led nowhere. But sometimes, late at night, the boy swore he could hear footsteps on the porch. Always the same pattern. 3 steps, pause, 3 more, then silence. Years later, he said he'd stopped being afraid of the dark after that, because fear implies you can run. What he felt wasn't fear anymore. It was understanding. Because that summer, he learned something he never forgot. Some games don't end when you stop playing them. Sometimes they follow you home. When you strip these stories down, the house, the woods, the stranger, what's left isn't really about ghosts or monsters. It's about the moment ordinary space turns against you. A basement becomes too quiet. The woods stop sounding like wind. A friendly face shows up in a place it shouldn't be. That's the line each of them crossed. Fear has a strange way of teaching us about ourselves. It starts as something simple: curiosity, boredom, a dare. Then, when the dark finally looks back, every sound becomes a question. What if that creak wasn't the floor? What if that whisper really knew your name? Psychologists call it hypervigilance, the body's alarm system turning up the volume until you can hear your own heartbeat. But anyone who's lived through a night like those boys did knows it feels deeper than biology. It feels personal, like the darkness is aware of you now, and it's waiting for you to acknowledge it. Maybe that's why the stories stay with people. Because we've all played our own version of hide and seek. We hide behind routine, behind the comfort of, it's just the house settling. We convince ourselves that what we felt, what we heard, was nothing. And yet, late at night, when the world thins out and the walls creak just so, a small part of us listens again. That's when the mind starts whispering back the old refrain, come out, wherever you are. It isn't about whether something supernatural stepped into those homes or out of those woods. It's about the proof that fear doesn't need a face to exist. It only needs space, a dark corner, a closed door, an unanswered sound. Because when the lights go off and the silence settles in, the game never really ends. It just changes sides. And maybe that's the real horror behind hide and seek, not the thought that someone might find you, but that something already has.